Hi, it's Adam from realitymanifestation.com, and in this video I'm going to be going through why you can't break the addiction of negative thoughts and emotions. By the end of this video, you'll have a much deeper understanding to why you have a habit of negative thoughts and emotions, and how on some level, even if you aren't consciously aware, it's meeting some of your needs and you are getting something from it. I'll also be covering some methods and strategies to help break the pattern of negative thoughts and emotions as well. Now, getting straight into it, one of the reasons why it can be difficult to break out of the pattern of negative thoughts and emotions is to meet the mind's need for certainty, which will make more sense to you in a moment. The mind likes to stick with what it's familiar with and look for more confirmation with its already held beliefs, and the mind's two prime motives are to help us either avoiding pain or gaining pleasure, with avoiding pain being the strongest motive out of the two. And for someone who's formed a habit of regularly looking for negative aspects of what's around them, or causing themselves to feel negative about themselves or the circumstances, and they feel certain this is how life is, this is how things are, and they have many beliefs that reconfirm their view of the world, to go against these views or this viewpoint of how they view the model of the world can literally cause their mind to associate pain, basically potential danger, at these different views that challenge their currently held beliefs, because a belief is just a feeling of certainty. So whenever you are challenging your beliefs, you are going against one of your needs, which is your need for certainty, which I'll cover in a moment, which with too much uncertainty can cause fear. And again, one of the mind's prime motives is to help us avoiding pain, as pain is linked to danger and potential death. So going against your beliefs and currently held views in the mind, even just on an unconscious level, can literally be associated with potential danger and even death. This is why it can be extremely difficult to discuss different viewpoints with someone with extremely dogmatic viewpoints and beliefs they've held for the majority of their lives. Don't worry if a lot of what I've said is a little bit confusing or a bit vague so far. I'm going to break it down in more detail in a moment, but just before going through your needs and how they could be met through negative thoughts and emotions, I want to also mention that on a neurological level, neural pathways are formed whenever we perform a task or new way of thinking or feeling, and based on the amount of times we repeat this task, this feeling, anything that's repeated regularly in the mind, these neural pathways are strengthened and become stronger and stronger and easier for the brain to automatically fire. And if the same neural pathways are fired over and over again, it will eventually become a habit. And this is how negative thoughts and emotions can become a habit and extremely difficult to break, as these neural pathways may have been formed and strengthened over many, many years. So you want to break the pattern of these neural pathways being fired so they diminish and weaken over time, and replace them with more empowering neural pathways so you feel and think how you want, which I'll go through in a moment. So now, to get a deeper understanding to why you might be addicted to negative thoughts and emotions, it's worth understanding the 6 human needs. Now, the 6 human needs is a model created by Tony Robbins, which is a very accurate model to why we as humans do what we do. All of our behaviour on some level is meeting these needs I'm about to go through. And to make it clear, these aren't wants, these aren't desires, these are needs that are within our nervous system. We are always finding some way to meet these needs, whether it has a destructive or empowering impact on our lives. So whenever you see someone, or maybe yourself, doing something that's very destructive, and you can't think why are they doing such an act of behaviour, it's because on some level it's meeting these needs. So to give a basic overview now, with the first need is our need for certainty, We all have the need to avoid pain and to gain pleasure. It's a part of our survival instincts. If you are listening to this in a room and you're not sure if the roof above your head is about to collapse or not, you wouldn't be interested in anything else I have to say. Your prime focus and priority would be to find somewhere you know you will be certain that you are safe. Our need for certainty can be met in ways that make us feel comfortable, that basically gives us some form of pleasure, such as food, drugs, alcohol, entertainment, TV, video games. We can also meet our need for certainty by trying to control everything and everyone around us, which so far are mainly destructive examples and ways of meeting our needs for certainty. Some more constructive ways are believing you're being guided by a greater power, by being certain if you take care of others, you'll be taking care of yourself. Now, as I'm going through these needs, reflect and ask yourself, is your current behaviour of negative thoughts and emotions in some way meeting any of these needs? So for example, with your need for certainty, are your negative thoughts and viewpoints on something stopping you from acting upon something that deep down you are fearful of the consequences, such as a fear of rejection? If this is the case in this example, it's meeting your need for certainty. We also have a polar opposite need, is a need for uncertainty or variety, and too much certainty, being certain of what's going to happen when it's going to happen, can lead to boredom. Is literally within our nervous systems to crave variety. If we have too much of the same form of stimulus all the time, it can cause us to become depressed and anxious, which has been proven through many studies. To simplify and give examples of how you can meet your need for variety is something that basically stimulates you in some unexpected way. That's just basically variety, as it says within the name. So it could even be from starting an argument, taking up a new challenge, doing extreme sports, gambling, sex, drugs, alcohol, basically anything that's a different form of stimulus that excites the nervous system. And again, with any of these needs, there are constructive and destructive ways of meeting them. So ask yourself, when you're going into a pattern, a habit of negative thoughts and emotions, is it in some way meeting your need for uncertainty and variety? If you find you get bored of feeling a particular way and feeling sad or depressed, or whatever it is you are doing that's having a destructive impact, that you get some form of variety and excitement, then there's a good chance that it's meeting your need for uncertainty. And moving on to the third need is a need for significance, which could also be described as feeling important, special or unique. Examples of meeting this need could be earning the most amount of money, having a higher status, making the biggest contribution to your local community, having the biggest problem or challenge more so than anyone else, being the most spiritually developed, which is a common pitfall for many of us that are into spiritual kind of content and teachings. But if someone feels so significant, unique and special in comparison to others, it can violate the fourth need, which is a need for love and connection. We all have a need to connect with others and ourselves. This need can be met by simply interacting with others, joining a group or a gang. Some people meet this need by aligning and feeling connected with their creator. Some people take drugs or alcohol to be accepted by certain groups or individuals to be able to meet their needs for love and connection. Then there's obviously intimate relationships as well, but not all intimate relationships cause someone to feel loved or connected, because what causes us to feel like our needs are being met are not based on the outside circumstances, but based on the meanings we attach to what's happening all around us. Two people could have the exact same outside circumstances, but based on the meanings they attach to what's happening to them, they could feel extremely different. One could feel extremely significant, whilst the other could feel insignificant, based on how they perceive it, for example. So ask yourself this: when you're having a pattern of negative thoughts and emotions, at some level, are people or even yourself, are you meeting your need for love and connection? This can be even including feeling more connected and giving yourself more attention, as you can meet this need of connecting and loving yourself. But are you doing it in a destructive way? So these first 4 needs I've just gone through are the fundamental needs that basically we will always find a way of meeting them. Regardless of what's happening, we'll always go to find a way of meeting these 4 needs. And the last 2 needs are called the needs of the spirit. Like I've said, you'll always find a way of meeting the first 4 fundamental needs, but unless you meet these last 2 I'm going to mention, you won't feel fulfilled. I'm going to cover these very briefly, as it's very unlikely that you're consistently meeting these last 2 needs if you're in a pattern of negative thoughts and emotions. So the 5th need we all have is a need for growth. No matter how much someone has achieved in their life, if someone doesn't feel like they are growing, they will feel unfulfilled and like they are dying inside. So to have a sense of purpose and meaning is fundamental, that you always feel like you are growing and developing in some way. And the 6th need is a need for contribution. We all have a need to contribute beyond ourselves. This is when we experience true joy and fulfillment, not just a temporary pleasure, but true fulfillment. So when it comes to breaking the pattern of any negative habits or behaviour, it's very important to become aware of what needs it is meeting. I've already done a video that covers these 6 human needs and how to identify what needs it's meeting in much more detail that I'll leave in the description box down below. So now bringing it back to what I mentioned earlier with the neural pathways, it's fundamental you find a way of breaking that pattern. To use an analogy, imagine you have a CD player and a CD is put into that player, which is like a program. The neural pathways that are being fired that triggers the emotion or the negative thoughts. If you were to take that CD out and scratch it several times, eventually you wouldn't be able to play it anymore. This is the same what you want to do with this neural pathways, this negative pattern that's being fired within your mind, is to break it so many times it can no longer be fired. So to give you an example, when you've likely had your own pattern broke, can you think of a time when you was deeply engrossed in a conversation with someone and out of the blue someone comes up to you and asks you a question totally off topic, and then after you can no longer remember what you was discussing? This is an example of your pattern being broke. I'll give you a slight example and way of breaking your own pattern now, but if you're new or unfamiliar with this concept, I very highly recommend you watch the video I'll link down below on how to break your own pattern, because any form of change is a change in patterns. In order for a new pattern to be created, the old one has to be removed first. So going back to the CD player analogy, imagine there's already a CD within that player, you try and stick a new CD on top of it, and this is why most people can't change or struggle to change, to put it more accurately. So when you find yourself going into a pattern of negative thoughts or emotions, ask yourself a question: what else could this mean? As questions are a very powerful way of changing your focus and breaking your own pattern, or changing your physiology or what you are focusing on, are all simple ways of breaking a pattern and changing how you feel. So to summarize what I've gone through in this video, you want to identify what needs you are meeting by this pattern of negative thoughts and emotions that you have, and then to break that pattern and replace how you're meeting your needs and the pattern you have that you go into habitually with something more empowering. So you find ways of meeting all of your needs that are empowering and don't lead you to having negative thoughts and emotions. I'm not saying you would never feel negative thoughts or emotions, as that's a normal part of our human experience. It's when it's happening consistently and habitually, far more than having empowering emotions or a positive, empowering outlook on life. This is when it becomes destructive, and then breaking those patterns so your mind doesn't habitually take you back into negative thoughts and emotions, so you can put a more empowering CD in the CD player, so to speak. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Also, share this with anyone who you think will benefit from what I've gone through on breaking the patterns of negative thoughts and emotions, and comment down below on what your biggest takeaway is, or what needs you've realised you've been meeting through this pattern of negative thoughts and emotions. I hope you have found this video useful, and I shall see you soon.